Everyone thinks that teens in our world today use alcohol, tobacco, or drugs to cope with everyday struggles. You may think they do,
but they don't. Welcome to the But They Don't podcast, a podcast for teens by teens. Join us as we cover substance use prevention, mental health, community conversations, and more.
Welcome to the But They Don't podcast. My name's Alyssa.
And my name's Katie.
And this is our first full podcast, and this is actually me and Katie's first time hosting, so we're going to introduce ourselves a little.
So, Alyssa, tell me about yourself.
Well, I love anything music related. All of my screen time on my phone is like Spotify 100%. What about you, Katie?
I play volleyball, so I am very active, and I am definitely not interested in this stuff, so I'm excited to be telling you guys about this stuff.
Yeah, me too. I really can't wait to share everything that we've learned. And to start it off, we actually have our Natural High of the Week. I interviewed my friend Eva. She's a cheerleader. I asked her what her experience was with drugs, alcohol, and vapes. She has family members who have abused them, and she's seen how it's hurt them, so she's not in contact with them anymore, so she's not really sure how they're doing now. I asked her what turns her away from these things, and she told me that since she's a cheerleader, she wants to be able to take care of her body, and she doesn't want to mess up her strength, and she really enjoys doing that, so she doesn't want to ruin herself from doing drugs or vaping. She's been offered it before, but she politely declined and told her that the person who offered it to her, she told her that she's just not interested. She doesn't want it to hurt her body.
Yeah, I can completely agree with that because I have experience with it. So I remember it was my freshman year. I was going to the bathroom, and a girl had asked me if I had weed on me, and I was like, no, I don't.
That's crazy.
And I was in there waiting for someone to give them something, and next thing you know, another girl walks in, and she's like, hey, do you have weed? And I was like, yeah, I need to get out, because the answer was yes.
Right.
So I was like, I need to get out of here. I don't want to be seen with this.
Yeah. So yeah, it's kind of crazy how often people just kind of like walk in and casually ask for that. Like, it's just something that teenagers just kind of carry on them.
Yeah, and it's not something that's cool to me. I just kind of think it's kind of stupid.
And it stinks too.
Yes.
Yeah, so we went to a seminar, Talk Hop. He was amazing. He
talked about a lot of different drugs that are out there.
Yeah, Jermaine, that's Talk Hop. He is, 6'9", something like that?
Yeah. And me being 5 foot.
Yeah.
It was not fun.
You looked really short compared to him.
Yes.
But yeah, he gave a really great seminar on drugs, vaping, alcohol, basically just kind of anything that is in the schools. He's a former cop. We're actually hoping to get him on the podcast sometime.
Yes,
which
I
would be
am
great.
so excited.
So I kind of want to get started talking about a little of what he's seen. But before I do that, I want to let Katie mention about what her teacher that you talked to.
Yes. So one of my teachers, my Spanish teacher, he is an intern admin. And so I was like, you know what? I kind of want to get his opinion on what he sees out there and what his point of view on everything is. And one of the things that really stood out to me was that he had told me that one day he was teaching and a kid actually put eye drops in his eyes. And he was like, oh, it's normal. It's just like a prescription. Nothing that he wanted to investigate. And then he was telling me about like 5 minutes later, he looked over at the guy and he looked like he was on drugs. And turns out that the eye drops actually had drugs in them that made him high. So I couldn't really find much information on that, which sadly, but it's crazy how that is, like, it's coming into almost everyday things. Because a lot of people use eye drops for basically everything.
Yeah.
And he also told me another thing that I thought was absolutely crazy, is that he was at one of the local schools, and it was out after school in the bus loop, and this kid started having a seizure kind of thing. And he had a dab pen, which is one of like a different kind of vape, but it has marijuana in it. The kid had found that in Walmart and tried it. It was in the Walmart parking lot. So it's crazy to think, like, all these things are out there.
Mm. Yeah, and you don't even know where that's been either.
No.
That's kind of gross. Yeah, well, going back to what you said about
The eye drops.
yeah, the eye drops. There's a lot of things that are like being changed into like normal things that you would use that are being changed into things you can abuse.
Yeah.
Like Tall Cop, when we went to see that, he mentioned like drinkable weed. Like, isn't that crazy?
Yeah, that's crazy. And wasn't there one that had the antidieterial, something like that? I thought there was one.
Yeah, it was like dieterial ammonium.
Yeah.
Yeah, that one, which is a medicine, and it can be abused as a drug, which is so crazy.
It's absolutely crazy. You don't think that everything out there can just be used as a drug, but it's crazy. It can be.
Well, he mentioned that really anything that is being misused or not intended as it should be, it can be harmful to you.
Yeah.
So, but it's kind of crazy how that happens. Katie, so that's kind of what your teacher's seen. What have you seen in, like, as a student? What have you seen in our schools?
I haven't seen a lot, surprisingly, but obviously it's out there, and you know it's out there. But I have worked with people that do vape, and I don't judge them for it, but I'm kind of like, can you not do it around me? Like, I don't want to see that stuff. So I always distance myself from them. What about you? Do you see any?
Actually, I guess it was probably last week or this week. I saw someone doing their vape in the cafeteria, and people think they are so subtle, but I promise you they really aren't.
Yeah.
And I mean, I guess they were trying to hide it, and so they would like take a latex glove and blow into it so like the puff of smoke wouldn't go out, which is so crazy.
Yeah, that's crazy. I know my teacher also mentioned that they are actually putting hidden compartments. Also, like he talked about in the hats and the book bags at Tall Cop, but my teacher said he actually found out that some of them were actually in hoodies. They were going to be in the arm sleeves, right around like the neck area, so people can hide it.
People get creative with hiding them.
Yes.
Like it's crazy.
So crazy.
Yeah, so there are a lot of common types of drugs that we see in schools, which the main ones are marijuana, cocaine, painkillers, alcohol, and those, I mean, sometimes I'll walk through the school and you can smell the marijuana, and that is not a pleasant smell.
It's not.
It's not subtle either. So
it smells like a skunk.
It does, yeah.
Like when you're driving down the road and you smell skunk.
And you kind of go right through it. Yeah. It's kind of crazy how many of these different drugs are misused. There's plenty more, but those are just kind of the main ones that are misused.
And honestly, when he was talking about it, he was saying all these different things, and I'm like, okay, I'm a teenager and I don't even know this. It's crazy. So I think it's not cool.
Yeah, it's really not. So some of the things that are really getting teenagers hooked onto vapes and weed and is flavoring it.
Yes.
And scenting it. I mean, whenever you walk through the hall at school, like sometimes I'll smell it and be like, oh, that smells good. Wait, that smells good. You know?
That smells too good.
Right. Like, especially in the bathrooms, like you go through and you smell that, and I mean, you kind of just know now, like someone's in here vaping. But then they also have been flavoring weed and stuff too.
Really?
Yeah.
I did not know that.
Yeah, it's kind of crazy. Another interesting thing that Tall Cop mentioned was the nicotine that was in the vapes is salt nicotine, which is actually a lot more addictive and can be a lot more harmful to you.
Yeah, and I mean, I think people are just at that point where they're like, oh, I don't care. So, when I'm sitting here, I'm like, what the heck? Why are you doing this to yourself?
Yeah.
And I understand it can be addictive, but just because it's addictive does not mean it's good for you.
You said, like, why are you doing this to yourself? Like, it affects them in ways, like, that they don't even understand. A lot of people think that it's helping, like, their depression or anxiety, but it's actually really making it worse. Like, I've seen such a downfall, and especially in teenagers, and studies have shown that, especially in teenagers, that the downfall in mental health and, like, their anxiety and depression, it's, like, the rates have just gone up for that.
Yeah.
And I really do think that has to do with a big part of, what they're using on themselves. And, it really stinks. Like, the suicide rates are up. There was a
TikTok that I had seen on TikTok, obviously. And there is close to 150,000 right now, just in February.
Like, it was not long that we started this year off, and that's so crazy. And I really do think that huge part of it is from them abusing drugs and alcohol and stuff, because it really just makes their mental health go down so much.
Yes. And I will admit I have struggled with mental health. But luckily I was lucky enough to have parents that were like, hey, I'm going to get you into therapy. We're going to help you get through this. And so now I go to the gym almost every day. I have a Starbucks addiction, which isn't that helpful.
Girl, same.
It's not that helpful, but it gets me through the day. But I'd rather have a Starbucks addiction than having a drug and alcohol addiction. Right. Like some people.
Yeah, mine's probably shopping. That's where all my money goes, not to the drugs. It goes to the stores. So another important thing is a little bit about, like, the effects that I've seen it have on people. My dad's a pastor, and so he's done a lot of work with people who've struggled with addictions and stuff. And I've seen people who just pretty much grew up, like, as a 12-year-old kid doing that all through, like, their adult years, and you see how it has such an effect on them too. Like, I've seen, like, side-by-side images of, like, when they were such an addict, and then whenever they were, like, completely clean, like, totally sober, everything. Like, it's so crazy, the difference in that.
I didn't Tall Cop say something about, like, 4th graders starting to use?
Yes, because
that's crazy.
There's some drugs that you can abuse that you don't need an age to get. So then you have these little kids going and abusing them and getting hooked on these things.
And my teacher had also mentioned something about one of his old friends when he was in Venezuela, because that's where he's originally from. He had this best friend, and he started using because something had happened, and he thought it was just medicine, but turns out it was actually marijuana, and he saw a crazy change in him, and he didn't know how to react to that. So it's crazy to think, and he didn't tell me the effects, but it's crazy. Like, so crazy.
And essentially, your body just comes dependent on it at a point, because, I mean, if you're taking it every day, then, like, your body just comes so dependent on it that you can't go a day without it.
Our blunt truth of the week, it is actually a fact that we find very, very interesting, and we really want to share with you. So, Alyssa, you want to take it away?
So this is in February. We mentioned one of the statistics earlier, but there are 628,000 smoking deaths, 314,000 alcohol deaths, and then about $50 billion spent on illegal drugs. And this is, like, this year, and it's only February.
Yeah, that's crazy. And I feel like we didn't touch on alcohol that much, so I do want to kind of talk about it just a little bit. So obviously a lot of kids are also becoming addicts of alcohol. Have you seen that like in your schools?
Oh yeah, and it's kind of become more of like a normal thing. Like it's not really as looked down upon as it is like vaping or doing drugs.
Yeah.
Just because like it's so easy for like if you've got an older sibling who can buy alcohol, like it's so easy for them to buy it and then just give it to them just because. Or like, I mean, there are parties that happen and there's huge alcohol busts that happen there too. And I know people who have lost like scholarships for college because of that too. So not only is it affecting you at that moment, it can also like affect your future.
Yeah, and obviously everyone knows the outcome of alcohol. You're probably going to wake up with a hangover the next morning. And you see a lot of deaths on the road because of it, because people decide to drink and drive, which don't do that. But yeah, and one of the things is we do know that the outcome of alcohol, but we don't know the outcome of drugs as much anymore because of all the new drugs that are coming about.
Right. So thank you so much for listening to this week's episode of this podcast. You can find us on Facebook at Pickens County Youth Board, TikTok at We Are PCYB, and Instagram at also We Are PCYB. So
we will talk to you next week. See you guys.